Konnichiwa Guan, and welcome back to Vulpecula Media. I thought I'd take the time today to run a little update on the current build situation. A long time ago this started as a Canon build, trying to get him as close to the books as possible within the game's remit, because the game does like to overblow, I suppose for the sake of enjoyment, Geralt's Canon powers. So let's have a look. So at the moment I'm rocking a full feline set of armor, legendary because it's New Game Plus. I had a comment on Reddit, well, not a comment, someone actually took the time to message me directly and sort of say, look, I'm enjoying your builds and I want to play the sort of game that you're laying out, but you've contradicted yourself a few times regarding the most Canon armor. And that's fair. I didn't really see it as a contradiction at the time, because what we're actually going for is anything that's light or medium armor, that's not too showy or splashy or inconvenient, because that's really the only layout for Geralt's armor design in the books. At one point he buys a black leather jacket, and that is specified, but it's also specified or implied that he'll wear what's going as long as it's light and breezy. So the feline was the earliest I could get. As long as it's medium and not too showy, you're playing by Canon, basically, or within the remit that the game will allow. So because Geralt is a mostly combat adept Witcher, this is what we're rocking. Okay, interchange it with whatever you want, whatever sort of suits really. Sticking to the simple starter potions still, with the addition of white honey. And then for bombs, we're staying non-incendiary. If you've watched any of these previous builds, you'll know that it's specified by I'm drawing a blank. Vesemir. It's specified by Vesemir that witches should never fight with a bomb that uses light or fire, unless it's particularly advantageous, because it also limits their vision and can work against them. Now into overshot into the skills. At the moment the build looks like this. These Whirl and Rend, I get a lot of comments like, hey man, you should be running Whirl because the dancing, the reference to Geralt being sort of like a dancer in the books, his graceful combat, and the Rend is not particularly applicable to Geralt, and I agree with both of those. So they fit in the extra slots that you unlock with mutagens. If you don't have them, don't worry about it. The reason that they're there is for the combat advantage, because you can arguably say, well, witches are superhuman, so they're super strong, so Rend is not a particularly uncanon thing to put on there. But yeah, it's not something you should be using all the time in this build. And Whirl, I don't focus on as much as people would think that I would, because Whirl, yes, it copies his combat dancing elven grace motif really well, but the one thing it doesn't do is play into one of the recurring themes in the book, which is witches using impetus, or otherwise momentum, for the less verbose amongst us, to benefit his combat style. And the key reason he does that is so that he can block and switch up and achieve 2 strikes in 1 and stuff like that. Whirl, simply through how it's programmed into the game, has a fatal flaw, which is that if you're whirling and somebody hits you, they hit you, and it stops everything, and it's a pain in the ass, and you can't really recover as quickly as, say, a Canon Witcher would. Some people it's not a problem. For me, I don't really like it, so it goes in the extra slots. The rest of the build Muscle memory, fast attacks, because Geralt is designed to be lithe and swift. Strength training is there just to mimic the super strength aspect of, well, not super strength, but additional strength that witches have. Arrow deflection is there because at least once, I think, Geralt deflects an arrow so well that it strikes the opponent and kills them. But arrow deflection would be there at least at a 2 out of 3 on the basis that it's a fundamental Witcher reflex, flex, if you will. That's how they show, you know, that they're augmented. It's mentioned a lot. It's mentioned a lot that, you know, they can block an arrow mid-flight. Moving on, we've got precise blows and crushing blows, just because crits are good, and I see crits as kind of translating advanced combat skills. You know, they aim for arteries, vital joints in the combat in the books, so I see critical hits as those landing. Fleet-footed because they are focused on dodging, but it's not maxed out, because if he does get hit, even mid-dodge, he will feel the repercussions of that. Next up, we've got counter-attack. Counter-attack, critical because of that impetus thing I mentioned earlier. Counter-attacks are a big focus in the books. If it came into one big swinging blow, or an accurate and swift counter-attack, I think from what I've derived from the books, that Geralt would pick a swift counter, rather than a big, risky slap. Crippling Strikes is there. It's not the most powerful ability. You could replace it with something more useful, arguably. But, that being said, things bleed when you cut them. I don't really understand why bleed damage isn't something that's just baked into the game. I guess maybe because it would make it too much easier, but I don't know. Sunder Armor's there because, again, it sort of replicates the ability to target weak points. That's it, really. And Deadly Precision is there, again, feeding into that deadly precision associated with witches. The 2% chance to kill an opponent instantly. If I'm honest, that's probably the only ability in the game that is underpowered compared to the books, because the way Geralt's passed off in the books is that if someone gets the better of him, he actually doesn't really stand much of a chance vis-a-vis the fight with, again, names. I'm not doing names today, apparently. Vilgefortz. Vilgefortz isn't even a trained soldier or combatant. He just beats the shit out of Geralt with a stick because Geralt didn't expect him to be able to beat him up with a stick. But for all of those sort of gang fights, bandits and stuff like that, Geralt's chopping his way through them with insta-kills all the damn time. Moving on to signs. Far-reaching Ard, because Ard in the books is a continuous stream of wind. It's not in the games, but in fairness, a far-reaching Ard is probably the closest thing to the book equivalent. And Axii, again, because it's quality of life, it helps you get through the game, and it is something that Geralt would use, although it's worth noting that Geralt would probably not expand down this tree, because he has a little talk with Eskel at one point about the ethics of using this ability. Geralt, I get a lot of people message me or comment saying, you know, Geralt uses all of the signs. I don't know why you've only got 2 of the signs on at any given time. People note that he's really gifted with magic. He's the daughter? I should hope not. Well, you know, it's 2021. We can be who we want to be. He's the son of a sorceress. However, he's not the son of a spectacularly powerful sorceress, which is implied by the fact she was even able to bear a son, because the stronger and more frequently you use magic, the less fertile you become. And it's even noted that Eskel, who has, you know, anonymous background, is more attuned with signs than Geralt is. I think it's one of these inconsistent points in the books. And then we have nothing from Alchemy. I used to put the tolerances in, but realistically, Alchemy is arguably one of the most broken parts of the game in comparison to the books. There are routes you can go, which I'll explain. So, Frenzy can be interpreted as when Geralt enters this sort of high adrenaline, drugged up mode, where he's essentially hyper aware. So you can use that, and I've used that in previous builds. The tolerances are, acquired tolerance doesn't really make sense in the canon, but heightened tolerance can be perceived as just the innate witcher's ability to withstand potions and poisons that would normally kill and are specified to be able to kill regular people. Poison blades, oils aren't mentioned, but if something isn't mentioned, it doesn't necessarily make it not canon. I mean, it does, but we're talking semantics here. If something's not mentioned, why not use it? The same with bombs, but just because of that advice, I don't really go bomb heavy, even when I do run alchemy skills, because the advice from Vesemir is like, you want subtle bombs. If that's an oxymoron, but subtle bombs is what we're looking at. Protective coating would be, I'd love it if that was something that we could get away with, because it's one of my favourite abilities. Unfortunately, it isn't. What else? Synergy is arguably the most witchery and canon of the skills, because that's why they are extra tolerant as witches. Synergy, the idea that the mutagens that they're afflicted by give a benefit, is the whole construction of a witcher. But that being said, it's a long way down the tree just to grab synergy. I mean, I could probably do it now, but it's more important to have those combat abilities. Let's have a look. What else? Hunter instinct you could pass off as canon, just because it's basically a combat trick, really. Refreshment, all of this tree, other than the first entrance, the tolerance and potions tree, or brewing as they're calling it, it's not nearly canon at all. Same with bombs, because they're not in there. I mean, you could argue for adaptation, but again, decoctions, when it's used in the books, is used as a very general term. It's a very general term. Just means something that's been made out of alchemical ingredients. There's no definition there, and in fact, there wasn't in previous games either. And what else have we got? Endure pain, I guess you could get away with. Fast metabolism, that is, I guess, canon. Yeah. And killing spree, again, you could tie that into frenzy. This tree is pretty well mapped out, actually, for if you want canon-esque abilities. General, I mean, survival instinct, yes, you could argue for that, but really that 500 vitality isn't going to help throughout the game, and it's, you're leveling Geralt up, he'll get stronger as he goes. Sun and stars, it's kind of an annoying feature, actually, because yes, that is canon. Witches are renowned for regenerating quicker. However, it's not tied into the sun-moon cycle, so I don't really know why they've gone with it that way. Crossbows aren't in the Witcher particularly. I do like how the game references, like, it's unusual. I mean, they're there as enemy weapons in the books, but I don't think Geralt ever picks one up. Anything that alters the way these stats interact will not be canon. I mean, gourmet is just the animal basis for why we eat stuff, so there's not a lot here that we can really work with, and none of these schools are the school that he attended. You could argue, if we're counting the comics, which aren't canon, but if we count it as part of the larger meta Canon, I guess. Cat School techniques, because he's had dalliances with the Cat School. And that's about it. I suppose focus, you can get away with focus, because you can pass it off as a sort of learned technique. Battle Frenzy, no. There's no real like Hulk out moment in the books, as far as I can remember, where anything like a Battle Frenzy actually occurs. So yeah, the general perks tree is really hit and miss. Alchemy, I had to decide when I was committing to this. A lot of the combat skills should be Witcher combat skills anyway. They should be built into Geralt's character, but that being said, they are learned, so they are skills, so that's what I went with, as opposed to Alchemy, where you can't learn this other than these two, which are brewing methods. None of these abilities are learnable through experience. They are baked into his abilities as a Witcher. So theoretically, when you start the game, Geralt's got all the Witcher abilities, biologically speaking, that he should have access to, and that's why this tree is empty for me. Again, it's open for interpretation. Sapkowski, has never been anything but a consultant and a guide of reference, and somewhere where they picked this game up from. So I don't even think he consulted on that. I think he consulted on the series. So they've made up a lot of this, and that's not to say anything bad about CDPR. I think they're great. It's just for the purpose of this particular build, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And you can kind of pass off these combat skills not being there as part of the amnesia that Geralt is suffering through games 1 and I think the early part of game 2. Although realistically, if you've played through those, he should know some stuff. But they redesigned the system, so I get it. There's, it's pedantic. It's very pedantic. And matching mutagens. So that's the state of play at the moment, where I am, just shown up on Skellige in the New Game Plus Canon-esque playthrough. For sword, using a legendary feline sword, just because it matches with the set. And again, I can build it right now. I will probably swap this for a Wolven sword because they have more balanced bonuses. And Erendite because it is the Canon sword, I guess. And that's it. Thank you for listening to me waffle. And thank you for taking an interest if you have thus far. And I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.